Welcome, my friends. Silouan here. We are back to the book of Job. We are now on part 5. We're nearing the end. Part 5 is going to take us to the end of Job. And then I'm going to do a part 6, kind of summing up the whole book. When we left part 4, Job had basically just been on a long speech. One of the notes I had was to justify himself. And justifying himself in a way, hey, it's hard to understand all these bad things happening to me when I've been a good person. And, you know, what's interesting, and you'll see this in Job 32 and on, that the acts of Job, like what he did to try to be a good person, is not really the thing that brings favor or not in God's eyes. It's not even what was the most important point or close to it for the entire book of Job. It was more, where is our heart, so to speak. So what happens next after Job's justification, shall we say, to bring us to the end of the book? Well, next, Elihu, who was a young man. The others that had been talking with Job, his friends, were older. They were his age. But this guy is younger. Now, because they were years older than him, Elihu had waited to speak to Job. So Elihu's kind of watching all this going on, watching the conversations, listening to Job. He's younger. Doesn't really say how much younger, but he's younger. And he's kind of biding his time. Very smart, by the way. That shows wisdom beyond his years. Usually when you're young, you're looking for places to interject your opinion. And he just kind of hung back and waited. I am young in years, and you are very old. Therefore, I was afraid and dare not declare my opinion to you. I said, age should speak and multitude of years. Great men are not always wise, nor do aged always understand justice. Now, that really stood out to me because in my leadership classes, one of the things I talk about is the paradigm effect. And the paradigm effect can lead to the paradigm paralysis. And it's basically this, that sometimes the most experienced, knowledgeable people can make the worst mistakes when circumstances change. Because we get so used to seeing the world a certain way that when things change, we can't adapt to them. Now, on the flip side of that, when you have all that experience and your mind is open and you're willing to understand that things change, you can actually adapt better, because you have more knowledge, because you have more experience. But if you're not careful, you will overlook data, you will overlook information. And Elihu is basically here to show them what they overlooked. In chapter 33, but please, Job, hear my speech. So basically, he's very polite. He explains to them, I've waited my turn. But then he kind of tells Job what he needs to hear. Surely you have spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the sound of your words, saying, I am pure without transgression. I am innocent, and there's no iniquity in me. So basically, Elihu is stepping back, and he's saying, now here's what I'm hearing from you, Job. That you're basically going, I am pure without transgression. I am innocent, and there is no iniquity in me. Yet he finds occasion against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks. He watches all my past. So basically, he starts by saying, listen, I've been watching this. And your argument is basically, you're pure as snow. There's nothing wrong with me. How could God be doing this to me? And then he begins to answer that. And really, this is kind of the point of a lot of the end of Job. For God is greater than man. Why do you contend with him? For God is greater than man. Why do you contend with him? So basically, he's going, hold on a minute, Job. Remember who you're really, at the end of the day, arguing against. You're not arguing with your friends and trying to say, why are good things happening to you and bad things happening to me? Really, what you're arguing against is the judgment of God. And as he does this, he talks about all the great things that God have done, how hard it is for us to even understand anything that God does. And then he comes talking about God's justice in chapter 34. Is it fitting to say to a king, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked? Yet he is not partial to princes, nor does he regard the rich more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. In a moment they die in the middle of the night. You know, not only wouldn't you criticize the king because what good would it do, but here's God who shows no favor to anyone, who could have anyone put to death. He has created everyone. Who are you to be questioning what God does? Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without wisdom. Oh, that Job were tried to the utmost, because his answers are like those of wicked men. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. That basically, a wicked man no more understands the will of God than the pure man. The pure man is merely humbling himself and following the directions of God. The wicked man is rebelling against God. Neither one of them understands God anymore. Neither one of them understands the reasonings behind God, understands how God created all this, heck, even understands what God is. Because of the multitude. Now he starts a diatribe here. I got ahead of myself for a minute. But in chapter 35, then he comes back to this. And it's basically like because of that lack of understanding, that pride that even people that are broken down have, that in a way it is as pointless for the humble man to cry out as it is for the wicked man to curse. Talking about self-righteous people that say, look at me, look at what I've done. Because of the multitude of oppressions, they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the mighty. But no one says, where is God my maker? No, this is interesting. That when people cry out and complain, are they really looking to God or are they looking at themselves or are they being selfish? Because of the multitude of the oppressors, they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the Almighty. But no one says, where is God my maker? They're not trying to understand God. They're not trying to have a relationship with God. They're not saying, well, why haven't I cried out for God before? It's merely, God help me, give me something. Who gives songs in the night? Who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the birds of the heavens? There they cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. And see, pride is within us all. So in a sense, all of us in that side of God are evil because we're full of pride. Because when things are good, are we searching for God? Are we praying to God? Are we thanking God? When things are bad, are we thanking God for the things we still have? We probably don't. And then Elihu, as he points that out, goes on to talk about just how good God is. All the things that he has given us. Bear with me a little, and I will show you that there are yet words to speak on God's behalf. I will fetch my knowledge from afar. Remember to magnify his work of which men have sung. Everyone has seen it. Man looks on it from afar. Behold, God is great, and we do not know him, nor can the number of his years be discovered. For he draws up drops of water, which distill as rain from the mist. Basically, have you stopped to think that this person, because think of what happens. Really what Job is saying is, God, you don't know what you're doing. You know, if you think about it, Job in his despair, and as warranted as it may have been, in a way what he's doing is, and it's pride speaking, going, God, you don't know what you're doing. You know, when we look at the world and we're like, how could God let that happen? Really what we're saying is, you don't know what you're doing. It's much more than just, I don't understand. We turn, I don't understand, into, you don't know what you're doing. How God must be an idiot. God must be evil. God must be bad. All because we don't understand. Now, lashing out at someone who has given us our life, who has given us this earth, that's kind of like a child having a tantrum, isn't it? You know, you love your child, but sometimes you got to correct them. Sometimes you have to do things that they don't understand. And when they don't understand, think how quickly your kid goes from, you know, Mom and Dad love me to, I hate you, you're horrible. And that's what we do with our parents. You know, in the relationship between a child and a parent is much closer than a human being and God. You know, now while a child is not nearly as smart or developed as their parent is, still in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the cosmos and the things that God created, you know, here's child, here's mom and dad, here's human, like here's God. Yet we act like that kid, screaming at God. Listen to this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. This person that you think is making a mistake, this person that you're going, how could you do this? He's going, just hold on a minute. Think about what you're saying here. Now, Elihu was onto something because the Lord comes up next. And in some of those earlier ones where, you know, Job's friends are going to have to be corrected, God comes along and basically rolls with where Elihu was going. And in chapter 38, this is the Lord talking out of the whirlwind, as it puts it, very poetic. He says to Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? So basically now, God has said, Elihu, you're onto something. And now I'm going to come and I'm going to bring it home. And and God basically goes on a long list of all the things that he has done, kind of in a way saying, like, you really think I don't have a plan? You really think that there's not a reason for this? You really think that I'm just randomly doing these things? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Or who shut in the sea with doors? Have you commanded the morning since your days begin? Have you entered the springs of the sea? Where is the way to the dwelling of light? Who has divided a channel for the overflowing water? Can you bind the cluster of the Pleiades? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds? On and on and on. Do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Who set the wild donkeys free? Will the wild ox be willing to serve you? The wing of the ostrich waved proudly, but her wings and pinions like the kindly stork's, for she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. He created that. Have you given the horse strength? Have you closed his neck with thunder? And on and on. Moreover, the Lord answered Job, and then finally after this, Job, hold on a minute. Remember who you're talking to. Look at what I've done. I know what I'm doing. Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? And now we are on to what I think are probably the 3 verses that help us understand the book of Job more than any other. So here's Elihu. Hold on a minute, Job. Basically what you're saying is you know better than God. You know better than God. You can judge what's going on and you know better than God. But then look at all that God's done. We can't even understand it. God comes along. He says, yep, he's right. Look at all I've done. I got a plan here. And then, directly answering Job's despair, shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him, in chapter 40. And then I have these starred, behold, I am vile. Then Job, this is Job answering God. Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. And now Job's kind of realizing, man, he's right. Who am I to be? Really what I've been doing is saying, I know better. I know better. Man, doesn't that get us in trouble? I know better. I'm smarter. Okay? I'm more humble. I'm more honest. I search more on Google than everybody else, so I have more information. No, you don't. And then this is my starred section. Disperse the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. Ultimately, the only way we will truly understand what God wants from us is if we're brought low. Because our pride is so great. Because we're human beings trapped in our own brain. We see the world inward out. It's us. We think everything's the center of the universe. Why am I not being blessed? Why isn't this going right for me? We don't understand eternity. We don't understand heaven. We don't understand hell. We don't understand creation. We want it to be all about us. And sadly, because of it, it brings us pain. It brings us death. It's this cosmic game to show us there is us and there is the Creator. And it is only when we understand our place through humility that we can truly find peace. And we can trust in the one who created all these things that we don't understand. And until we come to that point, there will only be pain, no matter what you have. Now, this story of Job is just a way to show us that ultimately it took all that pain for Job to understand this. Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. I lay my hand over my mouth. Very important. We like to do this. And he goes on, God, talking about that point of humility, all the things that bring us low. And then finally, Job, chapter 42 at the end, finally, he gets it. I know that you can do everything, and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I do not understand. There you go. I have uttered what I do not understand. Things too wonderful for me, which I do not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. In spite of Job's humility, in spite of helping the poor, in spite of taking care of his family, he did not know God. And he did not know God because deep down inside, there was a great part of him that thought he got it because he deserved it. Look at me. Look at me in this big universe. Look how special I am. And the second he had that thought, it separated him from God. Because he became that petulant child. He became that child that instead of wanting to understand or being able to understand what the wise parents were doing, they just lashed out. Or in a moment was like, I'm better than my brother. I'm better than my sister. I'm better than my cousin. And in a way, that's what Job was doing, even in what he thought was humility. But sadly, it was far from humility. It was pride. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what the book of Job comes down to. And in my opinion, the entire scripture comes down to. The thing that leads to sin, the thing that separates us from God, the thing that separates us from the ones that we love is pride. It's looking at the universe as if we are in the center of it. And what we do is righteous and what we do is justified. That whatever we're doing, we shouldn't, that we have good reasons for it. And it sets us above everybody else, and it makes us think that we can even begin to think like God thinks. And then we set ourselves up as a judge over the Creator, which is ultimately what we do when we try to sort of, be the, we think we're the arbitrator. We think we're able to understand how this all should be. Well, if I was God, I would do this. Well, if there was a God, I would do this. You just set yourself up as a judge over God. Could your pride get any greater? Could your pride get any greater? Could your humility get any lower? I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but it's the opposite of humility. So I want you to think about that, friends. Think about your own pride. Think about how you put yourself in the center of the universe. Think about how you put your wants and needs in front of other people. And ask yourself if you got the same lessons to learn as Job. What lessons do you have to learn about your own pride? Now, chew on that, and I will be back with Wrestling with Job, part 6. This is part 5. We're finishing up. And I'll be back with part 6, which will be a summary of all of these lessons in the whole book, although I think you all know the final point I'm going to make. Pride is the enemy, and we only truly humble ourselves when we stop questioning God, which is hard to do. I'm Silouan. Peace to you. Out.